So you may be asking yourself why I'd be doing these videos and where I suddenly came from and who I am to talk about enlightenment or talk about Krishnamurti's teachings, and what is my motive and why. Well, I'd love to tell you a story about how I was sitting underneath a tree meditating and I suddenly came to a realization, but my experience is a lot more ordinary, bleak, and unglorious, and absolutely common. I'm hoping that many of you can relate to what I'm saying and see that this whole enlightenment business, one thing's for sure, it's not only up to old men to decide, and it's not something that's like divine out there, something on the outside. It's within every single human being. If you're an empathic human being, it's not, it's more like it's within you, and then our life experiences, our conditioning, they're all put on these layers, on this layer cake. But the base of the cake, underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the drama and beliefs, that's what you want. And that's what everybody's trying to tell you. And every religious leader, every guru, every prophet speaks to the average human being, the everyday person, not only the people on the top ranks, only the people that have money or good looks or education. Like, it's always addressed to the average normal human being. So what happened to me was, the life that I knew, I was married, and spent a lot of effort trying to make it work and trying to fix things. And I had these ideas of everything is fixable and you just need to work on it. And I had a belief that if you always do good, then people won't just turn around and do you bad. Like, if you've never done anything to deserve it. I always thought that people probably deserve it when they get served a harsh lesson. Well, within 1 month, everything I knew, my relationship, my marriage, my family relationships, which were intermingled, which I realized later, because I spent my whole life trying to get away from my mother. And well, after 10 years of being married, I worked out that I actually married my mother. Not literally, obviously, I would have noticed that one, but in a more subtle, covert manner, I realized that I needed to learn a serious lesson about my relationship with my mother through my relationship with my husband, or failed relationship with my husband. Anyway, everything I had, like literally, like my health also, I had serious health concerns at the same time. Everything just vanished. And that left me in a really, really dark place. And I was like, to say that I was on the brink of suicide is probably downplaying the suicidal tendencies, because it was more of a try not to kill yourself today. Hold out another day and hope that things get better. And I remember at that time thinking like, okay, you feel suicidal now, you felt suicidal in the past, it'll pass. But I remember this one was like pretty, like that down that I had, especially if you find out that you don't even have the loyalty of your family, which I believed in back then. Now I don't care anymore. Anyway, I was alone. And I was in desperate need for answers. And first I tried to understand the psychology of, psychopaths. So I wanted to learn more and more about that. But the feeling of desperation, loneliness and sadness and the need to give up, that was all prevailing. Like, I was struggling to hold on. Really was struggling. And the life coach or psychologist or the person that I listened to that helped me a lot in understanding narcissistic relationships, his name was Richard Grannon, and he mentioned Eckhart Tolle. And like, I studied science and I believed in psychology, yeah, but I wasn't really too interested in going down a spiritual path per se, because as a staunch atheist, that also meant that I didn't believe in spirituality, or like I didn't believe in anything at all. Like I couldn't. Then, like, I knew what enlightenment was. I understood the concept of it, but I thought it was the same as, to me it was the same as believing in God. Like, I didn't believe in God. I don't really believe in enlightenment. So you can understand why I would have had some reservations listening to Eckhart Tolle. But I'm so grateful that I did, because, as I mentioned, like, the state that I was in was pretty dire, and focusing on the now, which I learned through Eckhart Tolle, that really helped me, because not only was I in the dumps, like, with my past 30 years on Earth, I was also going through a very stressful divorce. So, like, the focusing on the now helped me not panic about what is being done to me right now, and I was alone, so that wasn't that much fun. Anyway, I'm grateful for the shitty position that I was in. I'm grateful for my husband treating me like shit, my mother treating me like shit. Because thanks to their abuse, they pretty much, like, killed off my ego for me. Like, everything I'd done had been for nothing. Everything I believed in turned out not to be true. Everybody lied to me all my life. Every image I had of every person in my life was a fabrication. Like, it was my fault. Like, I had an image of the people that allowed them to lie to me, and I'd accept it. So I was 100% willing participant in that, and I needed to learn that lesson. And thankfully, like, Eckhart Tolle, he, like, assisted me just with coping with the PTSD and whatnot, and not breaking apart at that moment. And then he mentioned Jiddu Krishnamurti, and as a one of the most important things I learned from university is it's always a good idea to go straight to the source. So as soon as Eckhart Tolle mentioned the source was Jiddu Krishnamurti, even though I thought he was a guru or some, I didn't trust the image of Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I distinctly remember thinking to myself, it's always good to listen to the opinions of people you don't agree with. So that's how I went to listen to Jiddu Krishnamurti rather pessimistically, which you'd think that would have, like, it didn't matter, because as soon as I heard Jiddu Krishnamurti talk, as Eckhart Tolle would say, the truth resonates with you. As soon as I heard Jiddu Krishnamurti, it was like, I wouldn't say the truth resonates with you. It's more like, it's like a solidification of like vague ideas I've already had, and things that he said. I went like, yeah, I can see how this and this has been causing me stress, has been like, now I was always overthinking, over worrying, and I always knew that was wrong. And the one thing that, if I may add a scientific aspect to it, one thing that Jiddu Krishnamurti sort of mentioned was that thinking is a material process. And with the scientific background, I know that when the synapses fire, there's an electrical response, there's a chemical reaction. That means energy is released. So it's not only an idea that thoughts are a material process. Like, literally, you lose energy by thinking. So to me, that was like, from my egoic self, I understood the benefits for the human being if one could limit thoughts. I didn't think that you could completely stop thinking. I didn't think that was possible at all. I couldn't have dreamed of something like that. But as I mentioned, one of the important parts were understanding the role of the ego in my life and how much it has clouded my vision of reality. And due to my circumstances, like, I was pretty lucky, because I didn't have any attachments, because everybody abandoned me more or less, or kicked me to the curbs. And there wasn't much of an ego left. And the ego that I had, or the life that I had, the past that I had, for me, the negative definitely like, all my negative experiences in the past, or the trauma, the abuse, the stories that I've been told, I just looked at the negative things and I thought, yeah, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to carry that around with me anymore. Like, I'd much rather be rid of this, like, idea of I've been victimized, or I'd much rather shake that off. And when I looked at the good aspects that I thought that my ego had, well, they paled in comparison to the negativity that I was lugging around with me. And by understanding the significance of allowing your ego to die, or to die to your ego, which sounds a bit more spiritual than it is. All it is understanding that your ego is an idea, and an idea that you formed in childhood, and you've been carrying it around with you. And we get very defensive about our ego, because that's the ego talking, isn't it? It doesn't want to die. But the ego is rather similar to my my psychopathic relationships. One is in a bit of a Stockholm syndrome scenario where one believes the abuser, one believes in the good in the person that's being cruel to you. It's like when people get taken hostage and they defend the kidnapper. And it was hard enough to get rid of the real psychopaths in my life. It was a lot easier to get rid of the ego, because as soon as I allowed the ego to die, like the few good things that we think we have or we need the ego for, in the end, the only reason we have an ego is because we were hurt in childhood. So if we were hurt in childhood, we couldn't defend ourselves yet. We couldn't say how we felt. We couldn't process what was happening yet. So we start defending ourselves in our heads by saying, how can you do this to me? Because I'm so great, I'm so cute, or whatever you may have thought. Or I'm smarter than you, or whatever. It doesn't matter. That starts this cycle of trying to prove ourselves, expectations, and as soon as we can stop doing that, or as soon as the ego dies, we can actually stop doing that. And as soon as you can stop doing that, and you don't have any expectations, you go outside and everything you encounter is epic. Because you no longer narrate it in, how is this going to help me? How is this going to make me rich? How is this going to get me laid, or whatever? It doesn't make any difference. Like if you watch a child play with a stick, it doesn't sound like much for the ego. But if you actually watch it and you see the creativity and the beauty and the joy and the just life, and when you can fully appreciate that without the ego, then you know what true happiness is. And it's not out of this world. It's not divine. It's not something that happens to you. You need to think about your ego, why you started needing it, because everybody started to need it. That's not our fault. It's not our guardian's fault. They don't know any better. Nobody knows any better. It's time now for you to decide to be happy. And I'm telling you this because I wish someone told me this 10 years ago or 20 years ago, actually. And it's all you need to do is listen to Jiddu Krishnamurti. That's all I did. Nothing special about me, nothing smart, nothing. Like, I'm not spiritual. I think that the reason why it worked is because I didn't believe in it. Like, I didn't know what I was getting out of this. When I listened to Jiddu Krishnamurti, I was so broken down and so crumbled mess, such a crumbled mess, that I didn't have an ego anymore to listen to him. So I didn't try and interpret, how is Jiddu Krishna going to help me? How am I going to reach spiritual enlightenment? How can I get spiritual enlightenment and my neighbor doesn't? It's not about that. It's got nothing to, it's just take an hour of your time, 1 hour, and deal with your life. Deal with yourself. And trust me, there's no, like, right now is the right time. You don't need anything, you don't need any, just an open mind and humility. That's it. That's all. Jiddu Krishna is laying it out for you and trying to give you the greatest gift you'll ever receive. Like, for sure. Feel free to ask any questions, and talk to you soon. Thanks.